Well, hello everybody to the SCHLINGEL talk. This time we will talk about Quebec, about filmmaking in Quebec. Quebec is a very small province in Canada, 8.5 million population, and we have a lot of films from over there here on the festival. 8 long films and 1 short film, and we thought, why are so many nice films coming from this small part of the world? And that's why we've grouped you over here, and I will present my guests to you. So here we have Sarah Watts and Mark Slutsky. They made a film that's called You Can Live Forever. Then we have Mariloup Wolfe. Her film is called BILLIE BLUE. Then we have Sophie Roy, Butterfly Tale. It's an animated film. Then we have Sophie Farkas Bolla, and your film is Adventures in the Land of ASHA. And from the FIFEM festival, we have the head, the director, it's Blouin. Very nice to have you here. And perhaps you can just, before we talk about the situation of filmmakers in Quebec, tell us something about your film.
Well, I was the co-writer and co-director of You Can Live Forever, a film that is now, I think we premiered in June of 2022 at Tribeca and has had quite a healthy festival run, and it's been extremely exciting and fun to take it around the world.
Yeah, and it's a film set in a small Jehovah's Witness community in the 1990s, and it's a queer love story set in that milieu.
My film is BILLIE BLUE. My English not so good, so I'll try, okay? And my movie is a summer vibe, set in a water park, and it's a love story of a 16-year-old girl. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and my film is Butterfly Tale. It's an animated, 3D animated movie about the monarch migration, so that the monarchs leave from Quebec and fly all the way to Mexico. And so it's an action-adventure movie about 3 friends who make it all the way to Mexico.
Hi, my name is Sophie Farkas Bolla. I'm the director of the film Adventures in the Land of ASHA. So Adventures in the Land of ASHA is an adventure film set in the 1940s in Quebec, and it's the story of a little boy called Jules who moves up north with his mother to live with his uncle. And he has a rare skin disease. So very soon in the movie, he is sort of banned from school. So he spends all his days alone at his house with his dog. And then one day, his dog runs away in the woods, and he goes after him. And he meets this mysterious young girl who tells him that his mother could probably cure him, but she doesn't know where she is. So the two of them go together in an adventure to try and find her mom, and they discover the world around them.
Mm-hmm. Hi, my name is Blouin, and I'm the founder and director of the Montreal International Children's Film Festival, better known under its French acronym FIFEM. And I've been a friend of SCHLINGEL I did the first focus on Quebec film here in 2010. So me and Michael Habauer, the director, we're very good friends. He comes to my festival every year. That's where he discovers all those beautiful films that I pushed to him, and I said, you have to show them all. And that's why this year I said, let's make a focus, because this is a special year for Quebec cinema, and we'll talk more about it a little bit later.
What would you say? What is special about filmmaking in Quebec? Is it easier over there, or is it perhaps
I think
more
I'm not the best person to answer that, because I'm not a producer. I present those films. But in Quebec, we had a situation with a famous man, his name was Roch de Mers, who for 26 years made 1 film every year. It was a series called The Tales for All. But as long as he was living and making film, everybody was thinking, okay, he's taking care of the children. And nobody else did films for children. And then he was getting older and older, so there was a gap. When I started my festival 27 years ago, nobody made children's film anymore. No new ones, I mean. So that's why my joke is that I kept the audience hot, you know. I kept the audience, please come to see some fantastic film until we start making them again. And last year at the opening of my 26th edition in Montreal, I was so happy to tell the audience that we had 4 world premiere films of 4 new films made in Quebec, in that edition, plus the ones that were released a little bit earlier, like Mariloup's films or your film. So, and Michael is following because he comes every year. So that's when I told him, about all these films. Like there's another film here, but the director's not here, How to Divorce Your Parent. The film was released in the fall, so I showed it to Michael, and with Katak the Beluga, another animation film that's very, very popular. And Sophie's film was also shown, and it won a prize in my festival. Katak and another Coco film won anyway. So it was a big celebration. And I think you can talk a little bit more, you girls and you guy filmmaker. I think that this generation, they were raised with Rock's film. So it's a part of also realizing that it's important to make film stories we can relate to, with heroes that we can identify with, to have our own stories and our own adventure instead of all the beautiful adventure from our neighbors from the south, not to name them.
Sophie Farkas, your film has a topic that has to do something with Quebec because it has to do with the indigenous population over there. So it's really related to the history of your province. Was it that this perhaps easier to make this film because you had such an interesting historical setting for your film?
I wouldn't say it was easier. I think it was harder because I wanted to talk about. Oh my God, it's such a complicated question.
Would you prefer another question?
No. What was your experience? What was your experience for making the film? What would you say? Is it a good place, Quebec, to make films? What was your experience?
Yes. Okay. So that I can answer.
Yeah.
So I think what's wonderful in Quebec is that we have a lot of government support. So that's really nice compared to other places in the world where we have less funding for the arts. So we do have a lot of funding. So that's nice. I think that my film, it took a long time to make, but I think it's normal in a certain sense if you're trying to do more author-driven stories. So it took 7 years. So I started writing it in 2016. We got the funding for it in 2020, and then now it's out now. So it's, 7 years. 3 years to write, then the funding, and then everything. So
and the pandemic in the middle.
And the pandemic in the middle.
Of course. That was making everything longer everywhere.
Everything was taking longer everywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think if you're an artist and you want to grow and you know how to surround yourself with the right people, then it's a nice place to be a filmmaker, an artist. If you just need to be a little patient, but at least you have some support. So, yeah.
Is it easier because it's a film for a young audience, or is this no?
I don't think so. I think it's actually harder. I think like what Joanne was saying is that I think for a very long time, Roch de Mers was making these films, and then I grew up, and I think a lot of us grew up with those movies, and then they just sort of disappeared. And I see among my other friends that are also filmmakers, like Sandrine, that did the How to Divorce Your Parents, and another friend of mine who just got the funding for her film, which is also a kids' movie. It's sort of coming back, and I think it's the generation of filmmakers that grew up with those films that sort of want to make those films or want those films to exist, because if you're a kid and you go see Quebec movies when you're a child, then when you'll be older, you'll go continue and see them. And so for me, it's sort of like a big cycle to open the mind of the kids and in a fun way and all of this. And so, yeah.
If I can just add to that, is that there was, my idea just slipped. Roch de Mers always said, if the kids only see American movies when they're young, why would they see different movies when they're older?
For
and in Quebec,
yeah.
we live a very proficient. Also, films for adults are very. And we're very proud about our young filmmaker like Xavier Dolan and all those new Philippe Falardeau and all those young guys. The problem is that when their film come in the commercial venues, the kids don't. The youngster they don't go to the movie see this film. So the institution also started to think that maybe we should fund a little bit more of these films, not only films for the adults that we're going to. So it's a group thinking. It's not only you need the artists, but you also need the support from the institution that supports the making of the production, the writing, and so on. It's all the different steps in making a movie, and a festival to show them.
Sophie Roy, your film is the only animated film.
Yes.
What's so special about animation film in Quebec?
Well, I think there's a legacy. For animated films, there is a big legacy in Quebec. We were once and still are a big powerhouse. When you go to Quebec, you have huge companies that are there that do, international companies that do animation. Our production house, well, it's not mine, but the production house that I worked for is an independent, though, okay? So again, all of what Sophie said applies to us. It's the same fundings. We go to the exact same people, institutions, and so on. So that doesn't change. But what is different in our film is that since it's animation, we did a co-pro with Germany. So it's a co-production, 75% Canadian, 25% German. So that's why we're here at the festival under the German banner here. But also, so and it's because animation costs so much, our film is 16 million. So we had to really find the funding elsewhere. We couldn't raise that much in Quebec, Canada, so we had to come here in Germany, which tended to be a really nice partnership. We, because it was during the pandemic also, everything stopped and then everybody went home and worked on their computers. So whether I was working with teams that were like my next door neighbor or somebody in Germany, it ended up being the same thing because I had to be on my computer because we weren't allowed to be together, right? So it was the same thing. So in the sense, the pandemic wasn't a big deal for us. It just took longer, just like everybody else, took longer to make, but at least we were able to continue, and in fact we did a version which is called ScreenX, which is this new technology where you have 3 screens and it's Korean. So I even worked with a Korean team, and that worked out really great. So it was a wonderful thing.
So with people all around the world. But I didn't know that in Quebec the animation industry is so big. Why is it so big over there? I always thought these films are made in the Asian.
No. It's a huge thing. We started off Teletoon. It started off with companies in Quebec, and even the National Film Board is in Quebec. So the artists come who do internationally, right? Who come to work at the NFB, they come to Quebec. So we have a lot of traditional. I started out, it was traditional animation, so people were hand drawing and so on. Now that's almost all gone.
So you know animation really from the
very beginning. Oh yes, I'm
the
really
pencil
old.
in the hand and painting.
Yes, paint and the whole thing. So I grew up with that in my work, right, and also in seeing it. So it's been there, and we have many artists, and many artists from the entire world come to Quebec to work with us because we have work. They like our philosophy and our way of living in Quebec and who we are. We're a multicultural city and very artistic. And so, therefore, it's a combination that people really love.
That's very interesting. What is special about the people in Quebec? Why does everybody likes to come over there?
I don't know. Because look at us. We're wonderful. We're beautiful people to know.
Well, I can only think, when I see it like this, yeah, you're right. They're so beautiful people. I would also like to come to Quebec.
Yes.
Well, Mariloup, let's talk about your film and your experiences.
Yeah, my experience, my movie is based on a famous novel in Quebec. And it's my story is still like Sophie's one. I mean, it's the first version was in 2016, and it took like 7 years to have a film. So it's long, and for many years, institution didn't give money for young movies. So it was, youth movies. So it's changing. So they give more money for kids movie. So that's good for us.
In Germany, if you have a novel, if you have a book that was popular, then it's easier to make the film, to get money for a film. Was it the same for you? So because you had the film is based on the novel, did it make the process of production easier?
I think it helped. I mean, like, I think for the commercialization of the movie, it's easier because many fans are they like the book.
We have a readership.
Yeah, so I think it helps, but it was difficult. It was long.
Now we heard so many good things about making films in Quebec. Is there something that is perhaps more difficult than in other countries? What were the problems you were facing doing the film? Were there some things where you say, well, that was
I think
not...
it's just about funding. I mean, it's still. I think it's yeah, yeah. 16. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
It took 13 years for her to get it, though.
I had $5,800,000. Yeah. Okay. So it's not 16. Yeah.
Okay, Mark and Sarah. So I have the impression that Quebec is the paradise for filmmakers. Was it for you also easy? You know, what were your, how was it for your film?
Well, we started writing our film in 2013, so we also had a long road.
3 years more.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of that is it's waiting for funding. It's, you know, you hit a deadline and it's like, okay, maybe next year. Okay, then you have to wait another 12 months, 18 months.
But I think this is everywhere like this. Or I don't know a country where it's easy to get a film funded. But
No, I mean, but it's also not like somewhere like in the United States where it's all private funding. The movie happens and usually happens quickly or it doesn't happen at all. In Quebec, it's like you can wait your turn. And that's fine. I mean, you know, there is a huge advantage to making film in Quebec. Because we have national funding from Telefilm and then provincial funding from SODEC. So that's already twice as much as some people get. So it's a different way of making films, is a lot more support. And because of that, it means that there's an industry and it means that there are crew, post-production. There are people really talented who stay in Quebec to work on films. It's a huge advantage compared to a lot of other places if you're trying to make a film not in Los Angeles or New York or even Toronto, because there's a homegrown industry as well as homegrown actors, stars, directors that people actually recognize and know. So that is, you know, a public investment in art creates an industry and it creates an audience, and that's really important. It's something we're very fortunate to have in Quebec.
Okay. And now it was your first movie together, so and you're already planning the next one.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we also had the unique experience of making an Anglo film in Quebec, which, you know, there's through SODEC they I think 1 or 2 per year, maybe
20%.
20%. But the experience was good, was great. Right in Montreal, pretty much everyone is bilingual, so our crew was amazing. Most people spoke French on the set, but it was a wonderful conglomeration of French and English, and yeah.
There was some pandemic elements as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
We were delayed by about 6 or 8 months because of the pandemic. In some ways, it was fortunate that we were delayed because the films that were being filmed in Quebec, they were under very strict rules. So our producer was making another film, and the 2 characters in the film had to kiss, and they had a sheet of plexiglass between them, and they kissed up against the glass between them, and then they used CGI to make their faces normal. So we have, yeah, exactly. So we have very intimate film. It's a love story, and we did not want sheets of glass.
No, we won't film it until it's over.
But because we waited, once we started, everyone was starting again. So it was actually very hard to get crew. It was hard to get memory cards. Yeah. Even equipment, memory cards were sold out. So we ended up having to bring people from like Ontario and from Ottawa and things just because we couldn't find a grip. So that was a very unique time, hopefully, in filmmaking history.
Yeah, we hope it's done now.
Yeah.
But if the money is coming from not from private hand, so are there some rules or things that they say, okay, the film has to be in French because we want to support the French language in Quebec? What was your experience? Are there,
Well, I mean, I'll let Sarah speak to more, but
I don't remember the rules.
No, there was no rules like that. It was more like this is an Anglophone film, so there's less, we have less opportunities, less chances, but we still have a chance. There's just fewer. They just proportion the funding, more proportionate to the population.
Yeah.
But one advantage is like, as opposed to working with a studio or private companies, we made exactly the film we wanted to make.
Okay.
I mean, we probably would have, what we really wanted was a film with a little more money, but for the budget, no one was overruling our creative decisions. It was, the creative was entirely up to us, and the producers would argue or give their comments, but there was no one at the studio saying you can't cast that person or you have to cut this scene for a foreign market or anything like that.
So you were pretty free and could really
Yes.
realize the film you wanted to do. And the film is not only famous in Quebec, you told me is around the world. People are watching because of the topic. Perhaps you can, and they have pirate versions of the film. And perhaps you can tell us something about this.
You can tell the story.
Yeah, after we premiered at Tribeca, they had an online option because it was still like pandemic era. So, of course, immediately it was pirated, and yeah, it was being shared in mainland China, in Dubai, all over the world, with kids, young people making their own subtitles, overlaying them over other subtitles. So some of these horrific looking copies would just be like thick with subtitles at the bottom, and like the terrible encoding, and they looked terrible, but people were making TikToks, there's like 80 million TikToks, I think, of some of the scenes, and like they've written fan fiction, and it's absolutely been wild to experience. Pirating is bad.
So it's because you have this extreme. You have the topic is religion on the one hand, you have Jehovah Witnesses, and you have on the other hand the LGBT plus
Yes.
background, and this mix of contrast is what's making this film a bit explosive for us.
Young queer people are hungry for content about them, hungry for films, everything that they just want to see themselves reflected. And I think our film really resonated with young people, and so they ran with it. And the fact that it's being seen in mainland China, where it would never be allowed to screen because of its subject matter, is amazing. It's such a thrill. So for all the bad things about pirating, for a little indie like ours to be seen by so many people around the world that it never would have been seen by, we're okay with it. Yeah.
And I would just add, that particularly now, there's a great deal of pushback against anything for youth audiences that is LGBTQ themed. We see people marching in the streets in Canada last week about it. So any way that people can see something that reflects themselves, we support, even if it involves stealing our movie. Because there are people who want to denormalize the way people live and then re-stigmatize it. So we just want it out there for people to see, so they can understand that other people are like them.
Yeah.
So now you go around the world and present your film. So you also know other people who are making films in other countries. And now if you're on the festival like the SCHLINGEL, for example, what do you hear from other people? What is perhaps more difficult if they are not in Quebec making films? Do you have some interesting informations about this?
They just arrived.
I will ask you on Saturday after the.
Maybe they have time to.
Mariloup, your film, is it only shown in cinema, or is it also in? Is there a cooperation with TV stations? And
At first, for the funding, we do both. I mean, for the first, they are shown in cinema, and after, like 3 months after or less, they are going on TV or platform or yeah.
It's
And-
part of the funding.
Yeah, it's the part of the funding, yeah.
Financing.
Yeah.
You need the distributor, you need the, Well, I think so, huh? I'm not a producer, but it's when you build up your financing, you have to prove to FIFEM or SODEC that you have a distributor, that you already, contact these people. It's not just like we do the film and then we'll think about it later. They don't like that, They don't support
so
that.
it's like over here. So yeah, you have
I
to
think
make
so.
a plan
I think
first
so.
in the cinema and then all the
It
other
makes
stuff
sense,
coming.
and then the private channel and so on, pay-per-view and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I think that the problem maybe that I find is the children film or youth film that are made in Quebec, they don't stay in the venue long enough. Because there's so many films that are coming out that if you don't make the numbers, if you don't make the first million in the first 2 weeks, you're out. And that's the problem. That's why for my festival, the films, when they finish their commercial life, the year after I showed it on the platform of the festival, because at least to give them a life a little bit more longer, you know. It's of course when it's new we show it on the big screen, but afterwards, and that's a problem because Quebec is not a small province; it's a huge province.
It's a huge province, but it's
half the population live
population's
more or
not so
less
big,
live
yeah.
around in the what we call the Greater Montreal. So a lot of families are a little bit further, and they don't have. They're very badly served by commercial cinema. They don't have access, or it's far away, or if the film stays only 2 weeks in the venue in Montreal, imagine in those cities over there, if they go there, you know. So that's also a problem that we have to. I think it's a problem for our cinema to be able to stay on the screen, so the people, because the word of mouth sometimes it can take a little bit more time, you know. We don't come with, we're not the Avengers or those kinds of film with this huge media coverage. So, but it doesn't work like that, unfortunately, and we don't own the screen. So that's another another topic.
I just wanted to add also, and I think the panel reflects it, is that there has been a push by the institutions for women to be directors.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that push that they wanted, and they want 50% of the movies that they finance will be directed by women. And I think that that's very, very important. Because especially in animation, there aren't many women directors. I mean, it's like, oh, look at her. Oh, look, there's another one over there. It's like a shooting star.
No. Okay.
You know, it's like, look at while it's passing, because it'll never happen again. So these things, I think, are very important, these initiatives, and hopefully they will no longer be initiatives in a generation, and it'll be just filmmakers, and we'll stop saying women filmmakers. So that's the idea, but I think you have to start, and I'm always torn because I hate saying that, I'm a woman filmmaker, especially it's 2023. Why am I saying this? But I am. So therefore, the initiative is great. I hope that they continue, and I know that they will, because we're coming and we're like almost paving the way, if you will, for other people not to have to say, I'm a woman filmmaker. Yeah.
It's like, if I can give a comparison, I've been asked many times over 26 years, what is a good children's film? And I say, why should the criteria be different if it's a children's film than a film for adults, you know? A good film is a good film. And and the people, for many years, if you think you're going to make a children's film to make quick money, or, you know, if the script is not credible, so it's like a question I refuse to answer. No, a good film is a good film, whether it's for children, for youth, and a good film is enjoyable because my festival is for families. It's during school break, so I don't deal with classes, and I see parents coming out and looking at me like, "We just saw a good film." Yeah, that's the point. Congratulations.
So we talked a lot about the things that are good in Quebec, but are there things that are not so easy, or that perhaps more difficult?
Everything's perfect.
Everything's perfect. No.
For me, the challenge was more for the teenagers. I think it's difficult to interest to bring them to the cinema. They are like more on their iPhones, their iPad, Netflix, and everything. So it's difficult.
But I think this is a global problem for cinemas all around the world.
Yeah, it's true.
That young people no longer have this, oh, we go to the cinema. For them, I watch them on the iPhone or something. Yeah.
I think it's easier for a kids movie because we're going with our parents, so like it's a family party experience. But teenagers, it's quite difficult.
I think it's the age group the most difficult to bring into the cinema. But it's worth trying, and it's worth doing films like you do, because it's a beautiful film, and that's why we have to find any ways to support it, you know, to support its distribution, to support it in many, you know, like we try to do with schools and so on, but and you're right, it's all over the world, you know.
Yeah.
All over. But I was wondering, for you, for when the film was released, was it very popular in Montreal, in Quebec? Difficult, huh? Yeah.
I mean, we played for a few weeks in theaters, which is for a Canadian film is like, you know, is good. But you know, there's so much competition with America, and the exhibitors don't have you know they just want people to come into their movie theaters. They don't. I feel like the big exhibitors don't really care about whether a Canadian film or Quebec film. They grudgingly will let them in for a week and then. Okay, let's add another screen to, whatever is big that week. So that's the challenge, It's the challenge of being drowned out by a very large, expensive cultural force.
I just learned that female filmmakers are supported in Quebec. Is it that's why you work together also? Is it also a reason that you put it as a team together, a woman and a man, so that it's...
Well, we're best friends on a creative team that have worked together for 15 years and love working together. And we had a very, there was a lot of equality on our set. In fact, there was probably less equality for men on our set because all of our department heads were women. In fact, our film doesn't even have a single scene where two men speak to each other.
Okay, so your film was in English, yours was in French. You're, of course, also in in all the languages, and Butterfly also. You were also in French. So was it always free to decide in what language you want to shoot, or is that...
My film is in French mostly, but there's also some characters that speak English, and there's also some characters that speak Anishinaabe-Mowin, which is an indigenous language in Quebec and Ontario. So you're always, majority is in French, but there's not like, you're free to tell the story you want, with the characters you want, and however you want, or whatever is best for them.
So was it, in your film, the indigenous population plays a big role, so how was it to discover, did you learn before making the film a lot about this population, or did you discover it now by making research for your film?
Okay, so I started thinking about this film. Okay, so I also work as a film editor in Montreal, so I started thinking about this film in 2013, thinking about it, not writing it. Because at the time I was working on a documentary film with an Inuk filmmaker called Alicia Arnaud-Cook-Baril on a movie called Angry Inuk. So, yeah, you saw that movie? It's a great movie. So I worked on this film for almost 2.5 years as an editor, not full-time, we stopped and she went back around. And at the same time, there was the Vérité and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was coming out, and it was all about the the residential schools in Canada for Indigenous people. So all this information was coming out that I didn't know about, and this was like 10 years ago, and I was like, how come we never learned this in school? I was so upset. I was so upset about this, that this wasn't taught in school, and I didn't understand. So anyways, and I was also working with an Indigenous filmmaker at the time, so we talked a lot about this, and after that, I worked for Wapikoni, which is an organization that goes in communities and gives the chance to Indigenous young youth to make their films, because often Indigenous communities live in very remote areas, so they don't have access to all this. So I did that for a bit. And then I also worked on another film as an editor, another movie called The Beans by another Indigenous director. So so my life was this just happened to me a lot, so I was always thinking about this. And and as I said, I was very upset that I didn't learn about this in school. So I wanted to talk about this for kids in a way that was true to my story. So it's still this. So my film is also the story of a little boy, a little white settler that arrives up north and that finds this book that is full of, silly colonial ideas, and stereotypes, but the film addresses the stereotypes, but then he goes into the world and actually meets this little girl and discovers that the world that he has been told is not real, and through this new friendship he sort of he learns to see the world differently. And the film is also an invitation to try and think of how we can live together better and make friendships and all this. But it's also an adventure movie, and there's a dog, and it's like there's all these.
It's everything.
I wanted kids in Quebec to see a movie that sort of talked about this, but in a way that was positive and that would make them curious about, you know, the territory they live in, and just, you know, think about all these issues in a way that made sense for me, and that sort of went with my own personal, you know, just my own personal, the way that I, you know, just thought about this throughout the year. So, yeah, so it's like a very long process of reflection. No, I did not. I would never edit my film.
But
As an editor, I strongly recommend not to edit your film. It's the worst idea. I see it as an editor. It's always like they don't know what to do. They're lost. And it's
But perhaps just a question, because it's so interesting that you made this topic with and you say, you discovered a lot about this indigenous
I learned a lot about it, yeah.
people. But why did you make this story in the past then? It plays in the
1940s, yeah.
Because it would be interesting perhaps for children, for young audience to see how the situation is now in the...
It's the same situation. I think the situation in the film, what's depicted in the film, the situation really hasn't changed. So for me, it's in the past because there's also a fantasy aspect to the whole film, and there's a lot of mystery and adventure. So it was, I think it was, there's the fable side to the story that I wanted to keep real. And I felt that it was easier to do that if we were in somewhere in the past. It's not clear where the story is, it's not clear what time it is, but it's on purpose because I want people all over the world to be able to identify to this story, because all around the world there's been colonization, and a lot of people from all over the world are reacting to the film in different ways, and they're like, oh, we need this in our schools because we are living the same situation and people don't understand what's going on. So, yeah.
All right, then.
Like growing up, I was fascinated by stories about kids in the 30s, like the Depression, the 40s, the 50s. I think kids like to see how kids lived in other times. Actually, our movie's set in the 90s, so like that doesn't seem long ago for us. But for kids who are watching the movie now today, what is the 50s for us, right? And I think there's there's a storytelling power to putting it in a different era that I think kids respond to especially.
Without iPhone.
Yeah, exactly.
No internet, no.
You like to dress up. You like to dress up when you're a kid, and so when you see a film that's in the past, you dress up like the characters.
You have to take your microphone.
Sorry, because when you're a kid and you see a movie that's in the past, after if you like the film, you play like you're the film and you dress up, and it's more fun to dress up like in the 1940s than today. Well, you just steal like your sister's clothes and then she gets upset, and no.
Okay, perhaps last question for everybody. We heard that in Quebec everything is fantastic for making films. Very, very nice. It's a paradise of filmmakers. But are there still things perhaps that could have been done better? Not only in Quebec, but you as filmmakers, where you think, well, these are the next levels. These are the things perhaps in the future we would wish that it changes, that it gets better. And perhaps we just can make, Okay, if you have something
I
to
can
say
say something. Yeah. There's one thing I think that could be better in Quebec is that you don't have, I took the time because it was a pandemic, and I took a long period to do the pre-production, but often I feel like that period should be much longer than it is in Quebec. Sometimes people have 3 months, and I'm like, how can you prepare a movie in 3 months? Anyways, it's like, so I do feel like maybe there should be more time for pre-production. That's my opinion.
I totally agree with what Sophie said. It's a difficult. We have money for development, but in between development and then starting, there's like this gap, which is not filled. Right? So you were working on the script and making sure that it was okay to get your funding and so on, but then
3 years.
well, and some of us it was like 13 because it took 13 years to get Butterfly Tale from the first time the script came in.
13 years.
13 years.
Whoa,
to get it done. So there was a lot of we're almost there, it falls. We're almost there, that. So the producers, hats off to my producer who stuck with it, and so therefore production companies can't just have one project. It's impossible because you die. So they work on 10 to make sure that one goes. So it's a lot of energy on stuff that you're hoping will work. So it's, but that's on a producer kind of side of things that it's difficult. But just to get back to development, so you work on the script and then it's go. Just start, like it seems like the next day, and like you're saying, there's nothing in between, so how are you supposed to prepare? So that's what's missing. I agree.
I think this is not only a problem in Quebec, I think this is I think in Germany it's the same, that it's always long, then and then if you have the yes and you have to go, then you have to go very fast,
Yeah.
Mariloup.
I'll say two things. One, maybe putting a rule for cinema's owner that they have to keep our movies more than 2 weeks. I mean, I think it should be good for Quebec films. And also, I will exchange the, it's difficult in English, because Canada and Quebec, we have funding. But in Canada, they have a lot. In Quebec, we have some. And I will exchange the amount, because we have a really nice industry. We have our own films, our own culture, and we do a lot. And our movies are going around the world, and we have... it works. I think the people going in the cinema to see our movie, which in Canada, it's difficult for them because it's, as you said, they are compared to American movies because they're English. So that's my idea.
Yeah, good.
First, I agree with Sophie and Sophie about, and you, but I just, about the specific but pre-production time and time for rehearsal. If there was budgeted 2 weeks of rehearsal in pre-production, I think films would have like better performances. But I also think the industry has changed with streaming. A lot of films end up streaming, and that's a positive result. But a lot of the funding in Canada is still linked to theatrical distribution. And that gives distributors a great deal of power, and basically they kind of hold the purse strings in a lot of ways. They can make a film go or not, whether they choose to distribute it. And it does not give them a lot of incentive to necessarily promote the film or make it successful, because they get paid either way. And in fact, they have an incentive to spend less on marketing because they're already being sort of subsidized by the government. So I think the distribution funding model is broken in the era where, if your film ends up on Apple TV or Netflix, that's success. That is a huge success. It doesn't matter if it didn't play in, Calgary for 2 weeks. Like that. We have to judge film success by a different yardstick than we did 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, let alone 25 years ago when these guidelines were drawn up.
Yeah, that's where I was going. There isn't enough put into marketing of Canadian films from the distributors. Yeah. You never see commercials on TV, you never see trailers. That could really help all across the board for how long something stays in a theater. Way longer if you see a trailer on TV or on anywhere. It's just that they don't put the money in for marketing.
Okay, so we see it's good.
Thing, if I may, as you say, because the exhibitors, they also get money from the subsidies from the government, so they should also, Telefilm pays for them, Sodec pays for them, and they get money from them too, and then they should be not forced, but extremely encouraged, let's say. On reste, to keep our film on the screen for as long as possible, because of course there's life afterwards. But I mean, we worked to discover these stories on the big screen, and if we stop doing that, well, then we'll suffer the consequences. So, voilà.
Okay, so thank you very much. It was very, very interesting. I learned a lot about Quebec and about filmmaking in Quebec. But perhaps, thank you for your time. But now you make beautiful films, and they are shown here on the festival. And of course, we want to tell everybody out there what beautiful films they are and that they should watch them. So perhaps everybody can make a little publicity for the film in the end, just to say, why is it interesting? Why do you think that your film has to be seen all over the world, perhaps?
For kids?
For kids and everybody.
I'm talking to the kids.
No, just for everybody who watched until now.
Okay. Okay, I strongly recommend you go see my film because it's full of adventure and you'll see the beautiful Canadian landscapes and there's a dog in it and and it's a beautiful story about friendship and opening your heart to other people, so I strongly recommend you go see it.
I think you should go see Butterfly Tale because it tells the story of a little boy who can't fly because his wing is smaller than the other. And there aren't many films about disabled characters. And this is one disabled character who doesn't think before he acts. He just does and goes and wants to go on the migration, wants to do something, and he ends up doing it, and he ends up doing it his own way. And I think it's an interesting way to find out how does he make it? How does he make it from Quebec all the way to Mexico?
You should go to see my movie because it's a nice movie with very nice cinematography. I think it's a good soundtrack too. Lots of vintage references and good actors, and I think everyone can relate to a teenager love story. So yeah.
And the title, of course, is Billie Blue.
I do agree.
I think you should see You Can Live Forever to see why people around the world have pirated this movie and illegally tried to watch it. But seriously, it's a beautiful love story set among the beautiful Quebec scenery. It's funny, and we have amazing music. And Sarah?
And I think 2 incredible lead performances that really anchor the whole thing. And girls kiss.
So, and if you want to see more films from Quebec, we have the FIFEM Festival.
Yes.
And there are shown...
also more films here in SCHLINGEL.
Yeah.
The filmmakers could not be here, but there's Cocoa Farm. There's a film called Cocoa Farm that you must see. Katak the Brave Beluga, another feature animation. There's Echo at Delta. It's a world premiere here. It's going to be the opening film in my festival in March 2024. Don't tell it in Montreal yet, but it's a beautiful story also. So please see them all, and I just wish that these guys and girls and women, will continue for as long as they can to do this wonderful job.
Okay, so thank you very much. Good luck, all the best for your films, and thank you for your time. That was the SCHLINGEL Talk with a special topic, Quebec. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.